You aren't going anywhere. My sister looked me dead in the eye, tore my passport in half, and dropped it straight into the toilet bowl. As the water swirled my $6,000 and my freedom down the drain, she smirked and said, "Now you have to stay and watch my kid." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to scream, to stop her, to do something. They didn't. They stood in the doorway and laughed. In that second, I realized this wasn't a family home anymore. It was a prison, and I had to break out. I stood there watching my future swirl down the drain while the people who were supposed to love me laughed. Before I tell you what I found in my father's office that changed everything, drop a comment. What is the one thing a family member has done to you that you will never forgive? I slammed my bedroom door and shoved a chair under the handle. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely zip my suitcase. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse on the floor. I grabbed the stack of invoices on my desk, the proof of every late-night freelance graphic design gig I had worked for 2 years, and threw them into my bag. My name is Haley. I'm 24 years old. And for my entire adult life, I have been the family bank. I looked at the spreadsheet taped to my wall. $6,500. That was the number. That was the Italy fund. It wasn't gift money. It was thousands of logos designed at 3 in the morning. Thousands of skipped lunches. Thousands of times I said no to my friends so I could say yes to this one dream. And in less than 10 seconds, Brianna had flushed it all away. But as I swept my clothes into the suitcase, the real number flashed in my mind. $15,000. That was the running total of loans I had given Brianna over the years. Emergency rent money, car repairs that never happened, loans that turned into gifts the moment the check cleared. And then came last week. The memory hit me. Sharp and cold. Brianna had cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes gleaming with that predatory sweetness. She didn't ask me to babysit Mason. She asked for $6,000. She wanted a mommy makeover plastic surgery she claimed she deserved for birthing a grandchild. When I told her that money was for my trip, for my life, her face didn't fall. It hardened. That was the moment I finally understood the math of a narcissist. To Brianna, my savings weren't my property. They were a resource she hadn't tapped yet. And my refusal wasn't just a no. It was a theft. In her twisted ledger, my success was a direct insult to her struggles. She didn't destroy my passport because she needed a babysitter. She destroyed it to balance the equation. If she couldn't have the money, I couldn't have the joy. She needed to bring me back down to zero. To make sure the little sister stayed little, I snapped my suitcase shut. They thought this was about a vacation. They thought I was throwing a tantrum over a missed flight. They didn't realize that the ledger was full. I was done paying the Brianna tax. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. I wasn't just leaving for the night. I was closing the account for good. I didn't run. Running makes you look like prey. I walked down the stairs with my bag slung over my shoulder, my boots hitting the hardwood with a steady, rhythmic thud. I could feel their eyes on my back. Brianna, Brandon, my mother. But I didn't turn around. I had one goal. The front door. I reached for the brass handle, my fingers inches from the cold metal, when a hand slammed against the wood right next to my head. It was my father. Richard didn't look like the man who had taught me how to drive or walked me to the bus stop. He looked like a bouncer at a club I wasn't allowed into. He didn't say a word. He just reached up and slid the deadbolt shut. The click echoed through the entryway like a judge's gavel. He turned to face me, crossing his arms over his chest, his bulk filling the frame. He wasn't keeping the peace. He was blocking the exit. "Get out of the way," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the tremor I felt in my knees. "You aren't walking out on this family," he growled. "You're going to turn around, go back into that kitchen, and apologize to your sister." I stared at him. "She flushed my passport. She stole my savings. And you want me to apologize?" "She's stressed, Haley." My mother Patricia stepped up beside him. Her voice wasn't soothing anymore. It was sharp, impatient. "Don't be dramatic. Just transfer the money to Brianna's account. If you give her the $6,000, we can forget you tried to run away. We can be a family again." The air left my lungs. There it was. The naked, ugly truth. They didn't want a reconciliation. They wanted a transaction. This wasn't an intervention. It was a hostage situation. They were holding me in my childhood home until I paid the Brianna tax. I looked at my mother's face. For years, I thought she was a victim of Brianna's tantrums, just like me. I thought she walked on eggshells to keep the peace. But as she stood there, blocking my escape, demanding my life savings to fund her golden child's vanity surgery, the illusion shattered. They weren't peacekeepers. They were human shields. They knew Brianna was a monster. They had created her, fed her, and enabled her. But they were too weak to deal with her rage. So, they made a calculation. It was easier to sacrifice me, the quiet one, the good one, than to stand up to the tyrant. They would rather watch me bleed financial death than listen to Brianna scream for 5 minutes. They weren't protecting the family. They were protecting their own comfort at the expense of my survival. "You're not asking for help," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You're extorting me." "We're parenting you," my father shouted, his face reddening. "Now give us the phone and make the transfer, or you aren't leaving this house." I looked at the deadbolt. I looked at my father's clenched fists. I realized I couldn't push past him. He was stronger than me, and he was desperate. But he forgot one thing. I grew up in this house too. I knew where the skeletons were buried, and I knew exactly where he kept his secrets. "Okay," I lied, stepping back and dropping my bag. "You win. I need to use the bathroom first. Then I'll pay her." They relaxed. Just a fraction. The smug satisfaction on my mother's face made me want to scream, but I swallowed it. I turned and walked away from the door, but I didn't head for the bathroom. I sprinted toward the back of the house, straight for the one room my father thought was his sanctuary. I pivoted on my heel and bolted down the hallway. My father lunged, his fingers grazing the strap of my bag. But he was too slow. I reached the heavy oak door of his home office, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. I twisted the deadbolt and engaged the secondary floor latch just as his shoulder hit the wood from the other side. The door shuddered, but it held. This room was his sanctuary, built to keep the world out. Now, it was keeping him out. "Open this door, Haley!" Richard screamed, pounding on the wood with a rhythmic, terrifying violence. "You are making this worse. You are destroying this family." I didn't answer. I didn't waste breath on screaming back. I dropped my bag and slid into the leather chair behind his massive mahogany desk. My hands were steady now. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a cold, humming clarity. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the auditor. I woke the computer monitor. It glowed to life, demanding a password. I typed it in without hesitation, my mother's birthday, followed by his favorite football jersey number. He had never changed it since I set the system up for him 5 years ago. Access granted. While they screamed and kicked at the door, vibrating the floorboards beneath my feet, I navigated straight to the family cloud server. I wasn't just looking for a way out. I was looking for the ammunition I knew was buried here. My father was a hoarder of digital documents. He kept records of everything, convinced he was the master of his domain. First, the security system. I pulled up the timeline from 20 minutes ago. There it was. The high-definition footage of the hallway. Brianna tearing the passport. The smirk. The flush. Then, the footage of the living room. My father blocking the door. My mother demanding the transfer. It was all there: extortion, false imprisonment, destruction of property. I downloaded the clips to my phone and emailed a backup copy to a secure server. But I wasn't done. I knew there was something else. For months, I had noticed odd letters arriving from banks I didn't recognize. Letters my mother would snatch from the mailbox and hide in her purse. I opened the folder labeled Finances and clicked through the subfolders until I found one simply named B. I opened the first PDF. It was a credit card statement. The balance was $15,000. The cardholder's name was Brandon, Brianna's husband. But the billing address wasn't their apartment. It was a P.O. box in my father's name. I opened the next one. Another card. $12,000. Another. $18,000. The total debt was nearly $45,000. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. This wasn't just Brianna being bad with money. This was identity theft. She had opened secret credit cards in her husband's name to fund her lifestyle. And my parents weren't just ignoring it, they were facilitating it. They were receiving the statements, hiding the mail, and helping her make the minimum payments from their retirement accounts to keep Brandon from finding out. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just shielding her from consequences. They were active accomplices in financial fraud. They were willing to let Brandon's credit score implode, willing to let him drown in debt he didn't create, just to keep their golden child happy. It was the ultimate expression of the enabler's guilt. They had become criminals to avoid the discomfort of holding her accountable. Outside, the pounding stopped. "Haley." My mother's voice came through the wood, tremulous and weeping. "Please. We just want to help you. Don't do anything you can't take back." "I'm not doing anything," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm just forwarding the mail." I compiled the credit card statements into a single PDF dossier. I attached the security footage of the passport destruction. I opened a new email, typed Brandon's work address in the recipient line, and added the subject, "The debt you don't know about." I hovered over the send button. This was the nuclear option. This would end Brianna's marriage. It would expose my parents. It would burn the family tree down to the roots. I thought about my $6,000 swirling in the toilet. I thought about the deadbolt on the front door. I clicked send. 911. What is your emergency? My name is Haley. I am being held against my will at 2847 Maple Street. My father has barricaded the doors and is refusing to let me leave. I am in immediate danger. I didn't wait for the operator's questions. I saw the red and blue lights wash over the walls of the study, painting the room in a strobe of emergency. They were fast. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. I thought the nightmare was ending. I thought the cavalry had arrived to break the siege. I unlocked the deadbolt. The moment the latch clicked, the door didn't just open. It was flung wide. But it wasn't the police standing there. It was Brianna. And she didn't look like the tyrant who had been pounding on the wood seconds ago. She looked like a victim of a massacre. Blood streamed down her left cheek. Deep, jagged scratches marred her face fresh. Angry lines that I knew, with sickening certainty, had been carved by her own fingernails in the hallway while I was on the phone. Her blouse was ripped at the shoulder, exposing her strap. Her hair was a chaotic nest. "Help!" she screamed, the sound raw and terrifying. She threw herself backward into the hallway just as the front door burst open and two uniformed officers stormed in. "Help me!" She went crazy. She tried to kill me. She collapsed at the feet of the lead officer, sobbing hysterically, her body shaking with what looked like trauma but was actually adrenaline. She pointed a trembling finger at me, standing frozen in the doorway of the office. My sister. She attacked me. She stole my diamond ring, and when I tried to get it back, Look what she did. I stood there, my hands empty, my bag on the floor. I hadn't touched her. I hadn't been within 10 feet of her since I ran for the office. The officer looked at me. He didn't see a hostage who had locked herself away for safety. He saw a cold, unmoving woman, standing over a bleeding, weeping mother. "Ma'am, let me see your hands," the officer ordered, his hand resting on his holster. "I didn't touch her," I said, my voice calm but tight with shock. "She did that to herself. She's lying." "She's not lying." My mother's wail pierced the air. Patricia rushed forward from the kitchen, dropping to her knees to wrap her arms around Brianna, cradling the monster she had created. She looked up at the officer with tears in her eyes, tears for the wrong daughter. Haley just snapped. "Officer. She's been unstable for weeks. She was demanding money from us, and when we said no, she lost it. We tried to keep her in the office to calm her down until you got here." I looked at my father. Richard stood by the door, his face a mask of sorrowful regret. He nodded slowly. "It's true. We were trying to protect her from herself. We didn't want to call you. But she got violent. It was a masterclass in betrayal. They weren't just lying. They were rewriting reality in real time. They were willing to send me to jail, to give me a criminal record, to destroy my entire future, just to protect Brianna from the consequences of her own tantrums. They had chosen their side. And it wasn't the side of truth. It was the side of least resistance. The officer spun me around. Cold metal bit into my wrists. "You are being detained for domestic assault." I felt the handcuffs click shut. The sound was final. Suffocating. The physical weight of them dragged my arms down, pulling my shoulders forward. I was being arrested in the home I grew up in, framed by the people who raised me. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited, pushing me toward the door. As they marched me past the huddle of my family, Brianna looked up from her theatrical sobbing. She buried her face in my mother's shoulder, pretending to hide her pain. But she turned just enough so only I could see her. The tears stopped instantly. The fear vanished. And there it was again, that slow, toxic smirk. "I win," her eyes said. "You tried to fight the golden child, and now you're going to lose everything." The injustice burned in my throat like bile. They had stolen my money, destroyed my property, held me hostage, and now they were framing me for a felony. It looked like the end. It looked like the villain had won. But Brianna forgot one thing. She forgot that I wasn't just the sister she bullied. I was the one who set up the Wi-Fi. I was the one who installed the apps. And I knew exactly what the little blinking eye in the corner of the ceiling had seen. I kept my voice steady as Brianna screamed and my mother begged. "Officer, my phone is in my back pocket. Unlock it." The Blue Shield app auto-uploaded everything. He hesitated, then pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and pressed play. In silence, we all listened. My father threatening me, blocking the door. Brianna clawing her own face before pretending I attacked her. The officer removed my cuffs and turned on her instead. Brianna shrieked. The footage was fake, but he arrested her for filing a false report and destroying federal property. That was when Brandon rushed in not to save her, but to confront my father with proof she had stolen his identity and opened credit cards in his name. He told Richard he was pressing charges, taking Mason, and filing for divorce. My parents stared at me, furious and helpless. My father snapped that I was homeless, but I just laughed. I handed him the deed paperwork he had put me on the house title years ago when his credit was wrecked. I now owned half and was forcing a court-ordered sale unless they paid me $50,000 in 30 days. They didn't have it. 6 months later, I was eating gelato in Rome when the deposit hit my phone, $62,450. Brianna had pled to probation, Brandon got custody, and my parents lost their home and now lived crammed into an apartment with her. I took a selfie, sent it to the family chat with the caption, "Worth the wait," and blocked them all. For the first time, I felt free. Family isn't sacrifice without return. Peace comes from walking away and winning.